Crank time in Tripoli. There was a lot of violence in the news last week, but not much of it fit the mold. There were no major bombings or hijackings or massacres. Even South Africa was slow for a change, and only a few hundred people were reported killed in Lebanon on Wednesday. The Washington Post reported that the plane crash that killed popular pop singer Ricky Nelson last week in Texas may have been caused by a cocaine freebasing experiment that went wrong and set fire to the doomed DC-3 that carried the 7 passengers to their deaths. This was said to be the bad and shocking news for Ricky Nelson fans, who presumably still cling to the man as some kind of pure symbol and standard bearer for the lifestyle and values of the all-American, mid-50s, teenage suburban way of life that he once represented on TV. It was too bad, they said, that Ricky let his people down by going out in a wild blaze of drugs. Well, count me out on that one. I grew up with that newt, and I have seen his lame type come and go like fruit flies for longer than I want to remember. He was a punk, but so what? Only his ex-wife called him a dope fiend, and then her lawyer called in the press. But there was no evidence or reason or even a credible rumor that he was so deep into freebasing that he might go sideways at any moment and set drug fires of such brain-damaged magnitude that airplanes would melt in the sky, killing his fiancée and best friends. The accusation traced back to a 5-year-old divorce file, and even then it was all circumstantial. A nest of gibberish, as they say in the trade, and not entirely unlike the gaggle of wild charges laid by Ronald Reagan against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. The colonel was whooping it up in Tripoli last week with a fast round of bear-baiting, breast-beating, and unsettling displays of what is beginning to look like a genuinely perverse sense of humor. Although not everybody saw it that way. There were those in Washington, including some prominent Democrats, who saw the colonel's behavior as the last stages of some deep and malignant craziness that might soon cause the end of the world. Senator Howard Metzenbaum of Ohio, a traditionally flaky liberal, with credentials suggesting some kind of awful mutation with the genes of Hubert Humphrey, Billy Sol Estes, and a Stalinist camel driver from South Yemen, went on national TV to say that the time had finally come for Gaddafi to be put to sleep. It was a call for a political assassination. Maybe we're at that point in the world, said Metzenbaum, a longtime lobbyist for Israel, where Mr. Gaddafi has to be eliminated. Not even Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger was willing to go that far. Not even after the colonel discussed his plans for destroying the U.S. Sixth Fleet and perhaps every oil well east of Gibraltar in a lengthy personal discussion with Ted Koppel on Nightline. In almost the same breath, however, he assured Koppel that he was absolutely sincere about inviting Reagan Koppel that he was absolutely sincere about inviting Reagan to come and visit with him in his tent and hash things out like real men. Koppel responded by inviting Gaddafi to the White House for a long lunch without George Shultz, and Al-Qaeda said, "Why not? He's never been west of England, and only there for 6 months, long ago, which he spent hunkered down in some vile basement flat in Brixton." But when Koppel asked him to Washington, he seemed gratified. It was an encouraging exchange, as they say in the diplomatic business, and some even called it a breakthrough. Indeed. And so much for TV diplomacy. Within 24 hours, the colonel had shifted back to his Mr. Hyde mode and was calling Reagan a Nazi pig who should be put on trial for international war crimes. He reverted to his earlier assessment of the president as a stinking, rotten crusader. And an aging, third-rate actor who was even worse than his old movies, which are shown constantly on Libyan TV. Gaddafi also called for help in the form of a new international brigade of volunteers to join terrorist suicide squads to wreak havoc all over the world if the U.S. attacks Libya. Goebel had no comment, and Schultz laughed all night in his office in Foggy Bottom, and Gaddafi claimed he got 10,000 applications in less than 48 hours. My friend Skinner was not among these, but for reasons of his own, he left for North Africa at once. He called from the airport in Seattle last night, saying he was leaving at midnight on a charter flight over the pole to Amsterdam and then Cairo, where he and his group, mainly young female American schoolteachers, would be met by some of the colonel's people and whisked off on a fast coastal freighter to the Libyan port of Benghazi. The Egyptians were getting nervous, he said, about the sudden rush of strange air travelers to Tripoli. The transit lounge at Cairo International was swarming with ugly young men wearing Ray-Bans and hauling long Gore-Tex duffel bags with Harley-Davidson locks and Soldier of Fortune ID plates. They smelled like wax, and they paid in Swiss francs, and many had Lebanese passports. It was clearly a bad situation. I won't be gone long, Skinner assured me. This thing is a red herring. Once Gaddafi gets a look at these harebrained thugs who say they want to fight to the death for him, he'll put them in prison, or at least try to, and that's when the trouble will start. Most of these people are murdering scum who couldn't even get work in South Africa. He figured the whole thing would blow over in 6 weeks, and Gaddafi would drop out of the headlines. He's a stooge, he said. All they have on him is that he talks too much, which is maybe the worst thing you can do in big-time Arab politics. They didn't worry about him when he was a terrorist, but when he started talking about it every night on international TV, they got nervous. He's a dingbat now. They'll have to put the bag on him pretty soon, one way or another, or the other. I hung up and went back to work. Skinner was too dumb to cure and too smart to worry about, and his work was none of my business. The news out of Tripoli is still slow, but the pace will pick up soon enough. Even maniacs need time to reload, but it is a rare quirk in history when they all run at the same time, and anybody who has spent any time around wars will tell you that a sudden calm for no reason is almost always a time to get braced. Strange and ugly things are about to happen. January 20th, 1986.